Hello, everyone. Welcome to the theory class. Today, we're going to be covering lesson 31 as well as for voice. So this is going to be one of the most important lessons that you're going to come across because of the for voice. We will do that after we go through lesson 31. So before we get started, let's go ahead and do our evaluation for lesson 30. All right, here we go. Number 1, analyzing. They are analyzing the data. Number 2, practice. You need to practice on your machine. Number 3, swirl. We like to swirl the ice cream in the cone. Number 4, speculate. Don't speculate if you don't know. Number 5, largest. That is the largest building I've ever seen. Number 6, stamina. You will have better stamina if you exercise. Number 7, present. We were all present at the meeting. Number 8, evaporate. The water will evaporate if you let it boil too long. Number 9, girl. The girl is at the door. Number 10, reply. Will you reply to the letter? Number 11, reputation. Her reputation was on the line. Number 12, charge. What will they charge you? Number 13, understand. Do you understand the question? Number 14, vegetable. Why did you not eat that vegetable? And the last one, number 15, subject. What is your favorite subject? All right, let's go ahead and look at the board and see how you did. Number 1, analyzing. Now we're going back to lesson 29 when you learned how to take the medial vowel out of the middle of the word. So we're going to write that as A-N, come back for L, long I-Z, come back for final G. Analyzing. Number 2 is practice, P-R-A. That's our brief for practice. Number 3, swirl, S-W-I-R-L. Number 4, speculate, S-P-E-K. Come back for L, long A-T, speculate. Number 5, largest, L-A-R, final J. Come back for E-F-T. You're using your F for the S, S-T. Then we've got stamina, S-T-A-M, stam. Come back for N-A. We're dropping that I, stamina. Number 7, present, P-R-E-N-T. Number 8, evaporate, long E. Come back for V-A-P. Come back for R, long A-T. We have to use a long E so it doesn't conflict with he. Evaporate. Number 9, girl, initial G, I-R-L. Number 10, reply, P-L, short I. Number 11, reputation, R-E-P. Come back for T, long A, shun, reputation. Number 12, charge, K-H-A-R final J. Spelled with a G, but it has a J sound, so we use the final J. Okay, number 13, understand, U-N-D-Z. Number 14, vegetable, V-E, final J. Come back for T-A-B-L, and it's not a long A, otherwise it would be veg-table. Okay, and the last one, subject, S-U-B-T. All right, so if you struggled with those, I want you to go back before you start this lesson and practice because we're just building from here. And you're getting toward the end, so you really need to get that foundation before you move forward. Okay, go through your briefs every day. Every time you're on a machine, you should go through your briefs because now you've got a whole list of briefs and it becomes easy to forget if you haven't used them in a while. So get out that address book, add those briefs and phrases that you've already learned and just continue to add. Even when you're in speeds, you're going to learn new briefs. So it's not going to stop after theory. Okay, so it's really important you continue doing that and go through those every time you get on your machine. Okay, all right, so we're going to cover lesson 31 today. 31.1, consonants out of keyboard order. So oftentimes we have words that have letters that are out of our keyboard order here. So when that happens, we have to come back for whatever letter it is. In some words, consonants appear together in an order, which cannot be fingered on the keyboard in one stroke. So when this happens, it's necessary to return with another stroke for the last consonant. And you come back on the final side. Okay, so the ending LE is written final L. Anytime you have a word that's ending in LE, you just you come back for final L. For example, pickle would be written as P-I-K, and then you would come back for final L. You couldn't write it all together because it would look like P-I-B-L-G. Okay, so you write pick and then come back for final L, pickle. All right, and then if it's pickled, you would come back for final D after you write pickle. You still come back for a second stroke with plural and ED words, as well as ING words. Okay, so let's look at some of our words. The first word is settle. So we're going to write that as S-U-T. We have to come back for final L because that comes before the T. Okay, then we have fickle, F-I-K. We have to come back for final L. Sickle, S-I-K. Come back for final L. Settle, S-E-T. Come back for final L. Cattle, K-A-T. Come back for final L. Muddle, M-U-D. Come back for final L. Pickle, we just talked about that one, P-I-K, come back for final L. Castle, K-A-S, come back for final L. That has a silent T, so we don't even worry about the T with that one. Title, T-long I-T, come back for final L. Otherwise, it would be tilt. It would look like tilt or tilt. Wiggle, W-I-G, come back for final L. Hustle, H-U-S, come back for final L. Bustle, B-U-S, come back for final L. Wrestle, W-R-E-S, come back for final L. Tussle, T-U-S, come back for final L. Muscle, M-U-S, come back for final L. Battled, B-A-T, come back for final L, come back for final D. Now, when you get into speeds, if you want to add the ED words onto the same stroke, you can do that, but that's up to you. I know a lot of people, you'll hear, once you get out of speeds, you're going to hear that from reporters and students, but that's up to you. But in theory, you need to come back for final D words, ED words, ING words, and the plural words, okay? All right, heckled, H-E-K, come back for final L, come back for final D. Trickled, T-R-I-K, come back for final L, come back for final D. Then we have rattles, paddles, cradles, tackling, bottling, huddling, rustling, muzzling, sizzling. All right, so that is our main concept for lesson 31. Over on 31.2, we've got practice sentences. And again, before you start your homework, go through those words and practice them. It'll make your homework a lot easier. Even if you just go through the words before you start your actual homework. Okay, so I want you to look at line 2, the second sentence. It says, Joe is a muddle-headed kid. Notice that muddle-headed is hyphenated because it's an adjective describing kid. So you are going to want to strike your initial H, final F to get that hyphen, okay? So write muddle, M-U-D, come back for final L, and then you're going to strike your initial H, final F for the hyphen, come back for headed, okay? Down in line 9, second sentence over, it says, please tell Carla to hustle. So Carla is going to be written phonetically, K-A-R, come back for L-A, Carla. Line 12, second sentence, Bertha saves antique bottles. Bertha, B-E-R, come back for T-H-A, Bertha. Line 14, paddle your own canoe. Canoe, K-A, come back for N, long U. Very phonetic. That's the great thing about court reporting is even if you're taking a job and let's say you're not sure what the word is, you're going to completely write it phonetically and you look it up later as to how it's spelled and what the word is. Okay. All right. Everything else there looks good. 31.2, the next page over, the sentences continue. Again, line 20, first sentence, Grace is extremely fickle. You're going to flag Grace because it's one syllable. You don't have to flag the other two, Bertha and Carla, because they're two syllables. All right. Looking on over at 31.3. Words that end in final PLE, as in apple, we have to do something a little different. We have to come back for final L because we don't want to conflict with our brief many. Many is final PL. So, and we also don't want it to look like the final M. So if you wrote apple as APL, that actually would look like am. That's how we write am. So apple is going to be written AP, come back for final L. App, come back for final L. Okay. Let's see here. So this avoids the conflict with the letter M and as well as our brief for many. So when the first syllable ends in P, write the final L on the second stroke, even though it could be included in the first stroke like apple. Okay, this avoids a conflict with the letter M. So triple would be T-R-I-P. You have to come back for final L. Otherwise, it would look like trim, T-R-I-M. Okay, so let's look at some of our words here. All right. Alrighty, so some of our words here. Apple, we don't want to conflict with am, so we're going to write AP, come back for L. Topple, T-O-P, come back for final N. I'm sorry, final L. Again, if we wrote T-O-P-L, it would look like Tom, right? So we have to come back for final L. Rippled, R-I-P, come back for final A-D, final L, come back for final D. Otherwise, it would look like rimmed. Supple, S-U-P, come back in a separate stroke for the final L. Otherwise, it would look like some. Crippled, K-R-I-P, come back for final L. Grappling, initial G-R-A-P, come back for final L, come back for final G. The only exception, if you notice down below it says exception, the only exception is people. The only reason why is, well, there's two reasons. People comes up often, That word comes up quite a bit. And we don't have a conflict with people. So there's no such word as P long E-M, Peen. So we can write it as P long E-P-L. That is our one and only exception. Okay, so if you might want to highlight that so you don't forget it. That's our exception. Okay, looking on over at 31.4. We've got practice sentences. All of those are pretty basic. They cover everything we just talked about. The only word I want to point out to you is in line 8, first sentence. It says, he had an apple orchard. So let's look at orchard. That's going to be written as long O-R. Come back for K-H-A-R-D. You're borrowing the K-H for the C-H. Orchard. Okay. All right. Moving on now over to 31.5. Words that can be written in one stroke. So when the first syllable of an LE word ends in the letter F or B, add the L on the same stroke. For example, stifle. We can write stifle all in one stroke. S-T long I-F-L, because it doesn't conflict with anything. Okay, we're not using our PL, we're using FL. Okay. And basically all of these words in 31.5 can be written in one stroke. So another word, let's look at our first one, table. T long A, final BL, table. Sable, S long A, final BL. Dribble, D-R, short I, final BL. It doesn't conflict with anything. Rifle, R long I-F-L. Baffle, B-A-F-L. Trifle, T-R long I-F-L. Stifle, S-T long I-F-L. Able, long A-B-L. Bible, that does need to be flagged because it's one syllable. B long I with the flag, final BL. Shuffle, S-H-U-F-L. Sniffle, S-N-I-F-L. Nibble, N-I-B-L. Gobble, G-O-B-L. Foible, F-O-I-B-L. Truffle, T-R-U-F-L. All right. Looking on over at 31.6, we've got some practice sentences. Again, there's just a few words that I want to cover with you. Line 4 says, they are a troubled people. And then we've got trouble is brewing. So trouble is going to be written as T-R-U-B-L, trouble. Okay. And line 8, send it by cable. K long A-B-L, cable. All right. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. 31.7. We have words ending in final M-P-L-E. Again, we don't want the conflict with many, our brief many. Words ending in M-P-L-E should be written in 2 strokes. Initial P, final L, standing alone on the second stroke. Because again, we don't want it to look like many. So be sure to use initial P, final L. Okay, you want to write that down so you don't have a conflict with many. So let's look at one of the words here. Dimple, D-I-M, dim. Come back for initial P, final L. Otherwise, it would look like dim many if you use the PL on the final side. Okay, ample, A-M, and then you have to come back for initial P, final L. Otherwise, it would look like am many. Okay, so that's why. Write yourself a note if you need to. Samples, S-A-M, come back for initial P, final L, come back for final Z. Simple, S-I-M, come back for initial P, come back for initial P, final L, simple. Pimple, P-I-M, come back for initial P-L. Rumpling, R-U-M, come back for initial P, final L, come back for final G. Then we have temple, example, EX, come back for AM, come back for initial P, final L. Then we have crumple, trample. Okay, so again, we don't want to conflict with our brief many. Very important there. All right, 31.8, we've got some practice sentences, and they all are self-explanatory. They cover pretty much everything that we just talked about. 31.9, we've got our briefs. Let's look at our briefs here. Proper, P-R-O-R. Property, P-R-O-R-T. Then we've got record, R-O-R-D. Report, R-O-R-T. Important is P-O-R-N. Now, you might be asking, what about the word porn, which is going to come up. You're going to hear that. Whether you're a deposition reporter or you work in court, chances are you're going to hear that. If porn comes up, you're writing that with a long O, P, long O-R-N. Okay, that's the difference between important and porn. So the brief is P-O-R-N. Okay, importance, P-O-R-N-S. Okay, so it's not the briefs are not a long O. Okay, you're using the long O for the actual word. Okay, investigate, V-E-G. Investigation, V-E-G-S. Merchandise, initial M, final D-Z. Inquire, inquire is K-W, short I-R. And if you're asking or wondering why it's a short I, because it sounds like a long I, it's because we don't want to conflict with choir, as in, did you hear the choir sing? That would be K-W, long I-R. So that is why the brief is a short I. Okay. All right. 31.10 is a brief drill. All right. You want to separate with commas. 31.11, practice sentences using your new briefs. You look at line 1, second sentence over, it says exercise proper decorum. Let's look at decorum. You can either write that as D, long E, come back for K, long O-R, come back for U-M, or you can write it as D, long E, come back for K, long O-R-M, and squeeze that. Okay, I personally like to come back for the U-M, decorum, but if you want to save a stroke, you can write it as D, long E, come back for K, long O-R-M. And then you just have decorum. Okay, that's up to you. Line 10, second sentence over. Please answer the inquiry. So you just learned the word or the brief inquire. So inquiry is going to be written as KW, short IR, come back for AE. Inquiry. So you're using the brief and then coming back for AE. Right, everything else looks good there. The next page over is 31.11, practice sentences continued. Let's look at line 19, second sentence over. We are studying real property. Studying, S-T-U-D, come back for A-E, and then come back for final G, studying. Line 20, second sentence over. The property is in disrepair. You're going to write that as D-I-S, come back for R-E. Short E, come back for P, long A-R, disrepair. All right, line 21, first sentence, is there any record of the sale? We want to phrase is there, S-T-H-R, all on the initial side, is there. You want to phrase that. So underline that so you don't forget. 31.12, consonant compounds. Our consonant compounds with this lesson is going to be final PT and initial DW. So the final PT, you got to make sure and keep your ring finger up in the air. You don't want to accidentally strike the L. Keep it up, okay? I always feel like if I keep my index finger up in the air, it kind of helps me to keep that ring finger up. Some of your keys are very sensitive, so you want to make sure you don't strike that L. It would look like MT. All right, so let's look at your consonant compound words. Abrupt. A, come back for B-R-U-P-T. Adopt. A, come back for D-O-P-T. Concept. K-O-N, come back for S-E-P-T. Disrupt. D-I-S, come back for R-U-P-T. Kept. K-E-P-T. Wept. W-E-P-T. Slept. Erupt. Now, erupt is written with a long E because we don't want to conflict with he. Then we have apt, wrapped. Now, let's look at corrupt. Corrupt is a squeeze. K-R-U-P-T. Corrupt. Script. Looking down in line 7, we've got our D-W words. Dwell. D-W-E-L. Dwelling, D-W-E-L, come back for final G, even though you could do that. It is possible, but that's something you would want to do once you're in speeds, not in theory. Okay. Dwindle, D-W-I-N-D, come back for final L. Dwindled, D-W-I-N-D, come back for final L, come back for final D. Dwelt, D-W-E-L-T. Dweeb, D-W long E-B. 31.13, we've got practice sentences. Let's look at line 8. She dwells in marble halls. Marble can be written as M-A-R-B-L. There's no such word as mashal, so you can write, even though that's the S-H, you can write it as M-A-R-B-L. We don't have a word that is pronounced mashal. Then we've got halls. Don't forget hall is going to be H-A-L. Don't use a broad A. That would conflict with haul as in haul away the load, H-A-U-L. Okay, so that is our lesson 31. Now we're going to move right into our Q&A, which is our 4 voice. So let's do a little review. So far you've learned just the basic Q&A bank. The question bank is going to be the STK, PWHR, and our answer bank, EFR, PBLGTS. So today we're going to add on to what we've already learned. We're going to learn our 2 attorneys, how to sign them in, plaintiff and defense, as well as our court. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to talk about that. So hopefully you have already printed out your Q&A number 5. You want to have that printed out so that you can follow along with me, because it's very important that you understand the outline and the format. It's so important. Once you get into speeds, your speed test could be disqualified if you have an improper format. So it's so important. And you might have some questions in the beginning, which is very normal because it is a lot to learn in the beginning, but I promise you will get used to it and you'll get to know the format. And after a while, you won't even think twice about it. Okay, so we're gonna go over the sign changes first, and then we're going to talk about the format, and then I'm going to dictate the Q&A to you just for practice. And then I'm going to want you to do the Q&A on your own. Look at, like, physically looking at your Q&A number 5, and you're going to write it and you're going to submit it because I want to make sure you have the right sign changes. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about our speaker identification. So you already know the question and the answer bank. All right. Anytime the court comes in, and he's going to speak a lot, especially if you have a court case or you're working in court, the way that we identify the court is by striking the STPH, and I like to say the SNU and the IFPELT. which is the whole top bank and all of your vowels. So the way that looks with your fingers, and again, it's a little tricky for me because my keyboard chart is so spread out, but I'm going to strike STPH, FPLT, and all of the vowel banks, all of that together. And you're leaving out the bottom bank and the asterisk. Do not strike any of this. So the quart is the top bank, okay, and the vowels. That's how we strike the quart, okay? Now let's talk about the plaintiff attorney. The way that we let our, let's see here, we have a notification. The way that we let ourselves know, and anybody else looking at our transcript, that a plaintiff attorney is talking or the defense attorney is talking, we have to sign them in. So if he comes up and he starts to question, we have to sign him in to let us know what attorney is speaking. And that's the attorney. And the way that we sign him in it is by striking the STPHAO. We call him Mr. Snoo. Okay, we call him Snoo, Mr. or Mrs. Snoo. Snoo. Okay, the same goes with the defense attorney. We have to know who's speaking. Is it the plaintiff or the defense? And the way that we identify the defense attorney is by signing in the defense attorney as IFPLT, IFPLT. Okay. All right. Now this is just kind of off the record here. If you're out on a job, you're out of school, and you've got more than one plaintiff attorney, we call him Screw. That's SKWRAO, Screw. Now you're not going to see him in school, okay? Now you may see a second defense attorney in school, and he would be identified as IRBGS, herbs, okay, the IRBGS. That's how we would identify a second defense. But I don't want you to stress about that right now because that's later on down the road. You may see a second defense attorney. And if you do, usually the court will be taken out and it will be replaced by a defense attorney too. Okay, so that's just for your information. If you have another attorney that's defense, he would be signed in as IRBGS, and the plaintiff attorney too would be SKWRAO. All right, but the two main ones are going to be plaintiff SNU and defense one IFPLT, IFPELT. We call them SNU and IFPELT. All right, so those are your speaker identifications. Now, there's going to be a format that we're going to follow, and we're going to go through that. Okay, if you notice on your sheet, you see witness. Anytime the witness is not answering a Q&A question and answer to the attorney, we're not going to identify him as with an A, which we've been doing all along with the practice. We have to identify him as the witness. So the way that we do that, if we want our software to know that we want the witness, is we would write WNS, WNS twice, witness, witness. Now, if you have Total Eclipse software, the nice thing about that is it's going to recognize if you need an answer sign or witness. So if you've got Total Eclipse, you can just strike the answer sign anytime, even if you need the witness, and it will recognize what one you need and put it in for you. So I'm going to stop right there. If you've got Total Eclipse, then you don't have to worry about signing in witness, because it's going to do it for you. All you need to do is sign in the answer, the FRPBLGTS, okay? All right, and then if you have another software, other kind of software, then if you wanted to say the witness, you would strike witness, okay? It's not the end of the world. If you were to accidentally strike the answer bank and you get an A, if it were a test, you would just go into the edit mode and change it to the witness. So it's not the end of the world if you don't get the witness and you just get an answer bank. Okay, so remember that. We've got room there for adjustments. We always have room. As long as you know who the speaker is, that's the most important part. Okay. All right. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at Q&A number 5. We're going to go over the outline and the format. All right. And again, if you need help with your format, if you notice that your software doesn't match this format when you go to, you know, if you're in speeds and or even in theory, your next test is going to have a little Q&A. If you notice that the formatting is different from this, then you're going to want to let Robert know and let him fix that for you because something got mixed up or changed. It usually comes with the right format. But if you notice that it's off, if the tabs aren't where they're supposed to be, let him know. All right, so let's look at line 1. First of all, it's always important, even if you don't have a full transcript, let's say you don't even have a full page, you always make sure that you have 25 lines, always, okay, even if it's not a full page. Otherwise, that will be disqualified. And we'll talk about all of the reasons that a test could be disqualified before you get into speeds. But I just want to clarify that today. Always make sure you have 25 lines. All right, so let's look at the first line. This transcript is going to start out with the court, and really we could start out with anybody. It doesn't always have to be the court. But if you notice, the court is in all caps. So make a little note on your sheet, all caps, okay, or highlight the court. Notice that it's all caps. The court is always identified as the court, no matter what. The court doesn't ever have a question, like a Q, or it's always identified as the court, okay? So if you notice after the court, there's a colon, okay? There's always a colon after his name, the court colon. Then we have 2 spaces. So you can write a little note there, 2 spaces after the colon. Now he says here, will you tell us your name and spell it for the record, comma, please, period. Now I know that starts with will. Usually will means that's a question. But in this case, it's not a question, it's a demand. He's not asking the question, he's demanding it. Will you tell us your name and spell it for the record, please? So it's like a statement, a demand. That's why there's not a question there, okay? Now, anytime we've got please, we have to use a comma, please, okay? So let's look at line 3. We've got the witness. The witness is answering. So because the witness is answering, we call that colloquy. Anytime the witness is talking to the court or he's talking to maybe one of the other attorneys that's not the questioning attorney, that's called colloquy. Or if 2 attorneys are talking together, that's called colloquy. Okay, so in this case, the witness is talking to the court, so that would be considered colloquy. So we're going to sign him in. If you don't have Total Eclipse, you're going to sign him in as witness. So you get the witness. Now, if accidental, and if you don't, or if you do have Total Eclipse, you can just simply strike the answer bank, and you're going to get the witness, which I think is much easier to just have to worry about striking the answer bank anytime you see the witness. Okay, so it just makes it a lot easier. You don't even have to think about it. Now, those of you that don't have Total Eclipse, if you accidentally just hit the answer bank, it's okay. When you get into speed, you're going to have 2 hours to edit your test. And if you notice, oh, wow, I have an answer after the court, and you know that it needs to say the witness, all you have to do is change it. Change your A to the witness. So the same rule applies with the witness. It's all in caps, and it's got a colon there, and then 2 spaces. And then she says her name is Hazel P. Kerr, comma, Kerr, period. Now notice the court and the witness, that is tabbed over 1 time. So you're going to make a little note there, tab 1 time. Anytime the court comes in, or you have to, if the witness is speaking, the witness, you're going to tab over 1 time. Okay, so make a little note there, tab 1 time. Now I'm going to give you a heads up right now. Most names, proper names, are not going to show up in your dictionary until you add it. So anytime you write a proper name, you have to write it phonetically, and you want to have a readable outline. So Hazel, I would write that as H long A Z, and I would come back for EL, Hazel. Okay. P, so you're going to use your P, RBGS, Kerr, K-E-R, and you're going to flag it. Okay, comma, K-E-R-R. So then here you're going to do your stitching, K-E-R-R. Okay, when they spell out their name, you're always going to show that. You don't ever just keep it as Kerr and then take out the stitching where the hyphens are. You're writing everything phonetically. So you have to show that they spelled it, and that's what that reflects there with the hyphens. Okay, now let's say you forget to strike your comma after Kerr. It's okay. When you're in the edit mode, you would add the comma. You always add a comma before the stitching. Okay. Just because I give that to you in theory on theory tests, I'll say Hazel P. Kerr, comma, Kerr. Once you're reading or you're writing to a transcript or you're in speeds, I'm not going to give all the commas and all of that. That's going to be up to you to do it correctly when you're in the edit mode, when you're typing or editing a test. Okay. All right. Now, the witness gave her name, and if you look at line 4, this is what we call a byline. So make yourself a little note, byline. A byline simply means that's the attorney that is going to be questioning, okay? And every attorney questions differently. Some take their time, some make it quick, so you never know how long your questioning attorney is going to be. But that's what we call a byline. Notice that the byline starts all the way on the left margin. Okay, all the way on the left margin. And make a note of that. Bylines start all the way at the far left margin. You don't have to hit tab at all for bylines. Again, the byline is all caps. Now we're calling this by Mr. Snoo for today, because when you sign that attorney in, you're going to see Snoo because that's what you signed in. But when you go to edit your test, whatever that attorney's name is, let's say his name's Mr. Farmer, you would change Snoo to Farmer one time in your software for that job, and it will change all of the Snoos to Farmer, which is really nice. Because then you don't have to do it every single time. It's going to recognize that your Snoo for that test or that job is Mr. Farmer, and it's going to plug that in every single time that you write Snoo. But in this case, we didn't want to change. I wanted to show you what it would look like in Steno, okay? Which is exactly what I want it to look like when you do your homework and you write it in Steno. Now, the way that you come up with the byline in Steno is you're going to strike Snoo question. And by striking Snoo question is telling you Snoo is the plaintiff and he's asking the question. Sometimes the court will say, go ahead, counsel, you may question. But in this case, the court didn't say anything. He probably looked over at the plaintiff attorney and nodded and said, go ahead. And or the plaintiff attorney assumed they usually go first. This is probably the beginning of a case, and he knew he was going first, so he just jumped right in. So again, let's say you write Snoo and you forget to do the question bank, or let's say you don't have time, then you would add the question when you're in the edit mode, okay? So again, the most important thing is you are signing in who the speaker is. You want to make sure you're signing in it's the plaintiff Snoo and not Mr. Ifpelt. Or if you don't have anything and you simply just have a cue, you're going to ask yourself, who's questioning? You have to know, is it the plaintiff? Is it the defense? Because the plaintiff doesn't always start out, okay? Okay, so that is how you get that byline and then followed by a question. So let's look at that format. So by Mr. Snoo, colon, and then if you notice, the question starts on the next line. And that next line, the question is tabbed over one time. So make yourself a note. Tab one time for Q, tab one time for A. If you notice the A below it is right where the Q is. Any Qs and As are tabbed over once. Okay? Then you're going to tab again. You're going to tab again and tab over one time, and that's where you're going to edit, are you married, comma, ma'am, interrog. Now don't forget, we don't want ending punctuation. You can add your punctuation that's in the middle if you've got sentences going on, and you can add your punctuation, but you don't have to. You can always add the punctuation the internal punctuation when you're in the edit mode. Especially when you're in speeds and you're trying to get the test, the most important things to do is get the sign changes and the words, okay? All right, so again, there's ma'am. Are you married, comma, ma'am? That's a direct address, so we need a comma. Kind of like if that sentence says, ma'am, are you married? You would need ma'am, comma, are you married? Because it's a direct address, okay? Line 6, answer, yes, sir. So let's go back to line 4. When I see this light up, and you're going to keep your eyes on the light board, because if you look down for just a second, you might miss a sign change. So if I see that, and I know that he's going to be asking a question, are you married, ma'am? I'm going to strike SNU question. Are you married, ma'am? And then once I see this, I know I'm striking my answer bank. Yes, sir. Okay, then now after yes, sir, and notice that yes, sir in line 6, it's an answer. It's an answer sign because that is the answer. The witness is no longer the witness. The witness is now answering the questioning attorney. So now that's what we get into is called Q&A. Okay, now line 7, we no longer have to identify who the speaker is because we know that it's plaintiff attorney. The only time we have to re-identify them is if they get cut off by the court or the other attorney. So he's asking another question, line 7. All we have to do now is simply strike the question bank. Question, how old are you? Line 8, answer. Here's our answer. I am 21. Okay. Line 9. Now the court jumps in here and cuts off the attorney and says, don't be nervous. And the court can do that anytime they want. So if the court comes in, here's our court lighting up. You're going to sign him in as the top bank, STPH, FPLT, and all of our vowels, A, O, E, I like to say SNU and IFTELT all together. I think of it as the court is in charge of the plaintiff and the defense, so we're going to sign them all in to show that the court is speaking. That's how I always remembered it. Okay, so the court comes in. Don't be nervous. The witness, line 10, I am not nervous. Again, if you have total eclipse, you're going to just strike the answer, and it's going to actually change it because it's going to recognize that the court just spoke and now the witness is speaking. So even if you hit the answer, the nice thing about that is it's going to change it to the witness because it knows that it's colloquy. I am not nervous. Now, if you've got any other software, you have a choice to either strike that as witness, or you can strike the answer, and then if it were a test, go back in and change that to the witness, as long as you change it. Anytime you see the court, and if the witness comes after that, you know it's going to be the witness. Another question I get a lot from students, they'll say, well, if we know that her name or his name is Hazel P. Kerr, do we ever identify the witness as Hazel P. Kerr? The answer is no. Even if we know the witness's name, we always identify them as the witness, never as their name. Okay, we noted in the transcript is what they said their name was, and we have the correct spelling, but we do not ever identify the witness as their name. Okay, all right, so the court says don't be nervous. Line 10, the witness, I am not nervous. Line 11, now obviously, the plaintiff comes back in and wants to question again. He's not done. So then you have to re-identify him because he got cut off. So again, you're going to do it again. SNU question. And the SNU question is going to give you a by Mr. SNU question. Next line, question. It's going to do that for you. You strike SNU question, you're going to get a byline and a question. Now let's say the attorney jumps in and just wants to say something to the other attorney, like, I'm only going to be 5 more minutes, counsel. You would not sign in your question bank. You would simply sign him in as SNU. Anytime an attorney speaks to another attorney, it's just their name, Mr. SNU, and whatever their name is. Okay, it's not a byline. The only time we have a byline is when that attorney is the questioning attorney questioning the witness. Okay, so you're going to re-sign them in. Okay, so new question. Mrs. Kerr, again, if you have time, you can throw in that comma. If you don't have time, it's okay. You can add it when you're in the edit mode. You are the wife of the defendant, Mark Kerr, and when the speakers are speaking, when you get this Q&A, you're not going to hear any commas. Okay, it's just going to be Mrs. Kerr, you are the wife of the defendant, Mark Kerr. Okay, so that's why it's so important to not worry so much about getting those, the internal punctuation, unless you are so bored and you're so on top of the speaker that you have all the time in the world to throw in the right punctuation. If you don't, it's okay, do it later in the edit mode. I've seen people not pass their test because they're too focused on wanting to get all the perfect sign changes, but they're missing the words and the sign changes, or they want to get all the perfect punctuation, and that's not the important part. Okay, your most important points that you want to get are sign changes and the words. Okay. All right, so Mrs. Kerr, again, there's a direct address, comma, you are the wife of the defendant, comma, Mark Kerr. And again, let me talk about proper names. When you get into speeds, you will get a word list at the end of every test. So as long as you have a readable outline, you want to write those names phonetically and worry about the spellings later. The only time you won't get their spelling is if it's spelled out in the transcript. But like in this case, Mark, you're going to get that later. Whether it's M-A-R-C or M-A-R-K, you're going to get that after the test would be over. So don't worry about that. Just have a piece of paper and a pen handy so you can write down those names. Okay? And when you're a working reporter, you know, as a deposition reporter, I always have my notepad next to me. And if a proper name comes up and somebody says, I work for Sedin Company, I would definitely stop at the break. I would jot that down and say, how do you spell Sedin? I can always look it up, but I always want to make sure I have the correct spelling. I never want to assume anything unless maybe it's Miller or something very basic. But if it's anything off the wall, you always want to clarify, and that's okay. All right. Then you change it later when you're in the edit mode. Okay, so now he's back to Q&A again. So if you notice line 14, answer. You're just going to strike your answer. Bank, yes, sir. Question, again, now look, we already know it's SNU, so we just strike that question, bank. SNU, okay? All we have to do is strike that question because we know who's questioning now. We don't have to keep, you know, identifying SNU when we know he's questioning. So now it's just Q and A, back and forth until he gets interrupted again or until he's done. So line 15, all right. Where did you live on October 24, 2017? And again, when you're in speeds, don't worry about the period after all right or the comma after October 24. You can add that in the edit mode. Answer, I lived at 3386 Forest Avenue. That would be, Forest Avenue would be something you get on your test as a in the word list. Line 18, now, comma, we always have a period, or I'm sorry, a comma after now, comma. Did you see Mr. Kerr leave the house on that day? Oh, by the way, on line 15, we always have a period after all right. Same with okay. Okay, period. How long were you at the store? All right, so line 20, yes, sir, I did. Line 21, question, about what time? Line 22, answer, about 2:30, period. Now, if you notice, line 23, Mr. SNU says, all right, thank you, Mrs. Kerr. I have no further questions at this time. That attorney is simply saying, I'm done. Thank you for your time. I have no further questions. That is no longer a question. Even though the attorney is talking to the witness and says, all right, thank you, Mrs. Kerr, it's not a question. So we just need Mr. SNU. And it's not a byline because it's not asking a question. He's done. So he's talking to the witness, and then he goes right in and looks at the court and says, I have no further questions at this time. So all you have to do is sign them in as SNU. Okay, now this may happen, and it happens a lot. You may be so on top of the speaker that you may have already struck that question. thinking he's going to ask another question, but all of a sudden he says, all right, thank you, Mrs. Kerr. I have no further questions at this time. It's okay, because when you go back in the edit mode, you're going to change the cue to Mr. Snoo, because you know Mr. Snoo was the one who was questioning, okay? So that happens a lot. If you're right on top of the speaker, especially in low speeds, when it's the words are spoken very slowly, sometimes it takes a few seconds before you realize, oh, he's done, and I just signed him in as the question, and that's okay. It just means in edit mode you have to do a little bit more editing and change it to Mr. Snoo. All right. Line 25, the court comes in. Again, we're going to sign in the court. Okay, when you see that. Mr. Cook, do you have any questions? So now he's talking to the defense attorney. And now Mr. Ifpelt comes in. Yes, Your Honor, I do. So we're going to sign him in as Ifpelt when you see the defense. Yes, Your Honor, I do, because he's talking to the court. Notice, though, and this is another thing that happens quite often, notice on the formatting, when he's talking to the court, in line 1 of the second page, it's Mr. Ifpelt, colon, 2 spaces, yes, comma, Your Honor, comma, I do. He's talking to the court. So you identify him as Mr. Ifpelt. But then once he starts questioning, it's a byline. So when you go to edit your test, you're going to use a byline by Mr. Ifpelt, colon, next line, tab over once, capital Q, tab over again, Mrs. Kerr, and that's where the questioning starts. Now notice there's no period after the Q or the A. Don't ever add a period after the Q or the A. Now here's another scenario that happens quite often. You may see that the defense is talking to the court, so you just sign him in as Ifpelt, and you write, yes, Your Honor, I do. But then he goes right into Mrs. Kerr, okay? So you write Mrs. Kerr, and then you realize, oh no, he's already speaking to the witness, and I didn't strike the question. I didn't strike Ifpelt question bank, because you have to strike that question bank to get the cue. That's okay. What you would do is in the edit mode, you would change that. If you just see Mr. Ifpelt, because you strike Ifpelt, you want a byline question, you would change that to a byline and then a question. You can add that, okay? As long as you have the right speaker, that's all that matters. And as long as you change it to the correct format, a byline with a question. And that happens a lot. Sometimes an attorney will talk to the court and go right into the question, and you don't have time to throw in the actual question, okay? So if you notice, that's our format there. Mr. Ifpelt, he's talking to the court. Yes, Your Honor, I do. By Mr. Ifpelt, colon, next line question, Mrs. Kerr, did your husband take anything with him when he left? Line 5, answer, yes, sir. Line 6, okay, period. What did he take with him? So now that we know it's just Q&A, you're simply just doing question, writing your question, answer, writing your answer. Okay. Answer, he had a bag with a suit in it. He was going to the tailor shop. Question, what color was the suit? If you remember, that's an adverb clause. So you want a comma right before if you remember, because that's an adverb clause. Line 10, answer, the suit was black. Line 11, did you see anything else in the bag? Line 12, answer, nothing else. Line 13, Mr. Ifpelt, may we take a break? Now, if you're trailing behind and you hear, may we take a break, you are going to get good enough to where you know, okay, I got to strike the Ifpelt, because now he's talking to the court, may we take a break? But it's okay. If you accidentally strike the question, then that means in the edit mode, you're going to change that question to Mr. Ifpelt, because now he's talking to the court. May we take a break? And then you're going to sign in the court. Yes, we can take a quick break. Okay, because when he says, may we take a break, you may strike the Ifpelt if you know that he's talking to the court, but you may strike the question because you think, oh, it's just another question, and that's okay. You just change it. All right, so don't let that stop you. All right. Couple things I want to remind you. Anytime you have a period is always followed by 2 spaces with court reporting. Okay, that's just the rule. Always 2 periods after, 2 spaces after a period. Okay, 1 space after a comma. I told you about the 25 lines, regardless of, now if you notice here, this transcript ends on line 14, but look, there's still 25 lines. And that is very important. You don't want to get your test disqualified, and that would disqualify it at the state test if you didn't make that line go all the way down to 25. Always check, even if you have your computer set, your formatting set, you always check it. I can't tell you how many people I know that got their test disqualified at the state test because they forgot to check to make sure they have 25 lines. Okay. Something else that I want to talk about, when you go into the edit mode, the first thing that will happen when you take a Q&A test, after the test is over, you're going to get a word list, and you're going to get all the proper names. You're going to write them down. Before the test starts, what's going to happen is I will say, okay, this is plaintiff attorney. His name's Mr. Hill, Hill, and you're going to write that down on a piece of paper. And you can also write it in steno if you want. You just have to delete it before you, when you're, editing your test, because that can be in there. But that's why I always say just write it down. So you're going to write down plaintiff is Mr. Hill. Okay. Defense is Mr. Barry, Barry. So I'll spell it for you, and you're going to write it down. Plaintiff, Mr. Hill. Defense, Mr. Barry. It's really important you don't get the 2 mixed up, because if you do, that's another reason to have your test disqualified. If you misspell an attorney's name, it's disqualified at the state test as well. If you mix them up, that is a reason to have it disqualified. So you always want to make sure that your attorney's names are correct. Don't get them mixed up. Plaintiff's name and defense, very important that you don't mix the 2 up, so write them down. P for plaintiff, D for defense, and that way you know who's who. Okay, and then what you'll do is you'll plug in, you'll let your software know, plaintiff is Mr. Hill, defense is Mr. Barry, and every time you hit that SNU or IFPELD, it's going to come up with the correct spelling, which is really nice. It saves you from having to go in and change the SNU and IFPELD each time. Now, just so you know, as a student, I kind of had to practice. When I got out of theory, I had to really practice with my IFPELD, because it used to throw me off that the question bank was over here. So really for SNU, it's easy to do SNU question. But for some reason, when I would strike the IFPELD question, I always wanted to do IFPELD question, and we can't have that because that is the answer bank. So practice that. IFPELD question. Even though SNU is over here, this is still the question bank. So you want to practice IFPELD question bank. Okay, so just a heads up, because that took some time for me to get used to. All right, now I'm going to show you, give you a couple more examples. Let's see here. I'm going to put something on the whiteboard. Share the screen. Pull up the whiteboard. We're going to do some text here. Okay. All right. So again, I'm going to tab over once. The court would be in all caps with the colon, 2 spaces. Let's go ahead and just say, go ahead, comma, counsel. Counsel is capitalized because he's using that as a proper noun. You can put somebody's name in place of that, kind of like mom. Go ahead, mom. Go ahead, Jeff. All right, so the court. Now, let's say plaintiff starts out. So we're going to give him a byline. By Mr. Hill, colon. Go to the next line, tab over once. Here's your question, tab again. How old are you? Mike. And then actually, and it's always going to be double spaced. So let me double space this. So we've got the correct format. Tab over once. Answer. I am 35. Now, let's say that the other attorney, the defense attorney, wants to jump in. And his name's Mr. Barry. Okay, so all caps, colon, 2 spaces. Your Honor. Now, honor is always capitalized. Your is because it's the beginning of the sentence. But if it's in, let's say you have your honor somewhere in the middle. I can't hear your honor. It would be I can't hear comma your honor, and your would be lowercase, but honor would have a capital H. Okay. In this case, we're going to have it in the beginning. Your Honor, may we take a quick break? And then let's say the other attorney jumps in. And his name is Mr. Hill. Oops, sorry about that. Colon, 2 spaces. We just started, counsel. We just started back, counsel. Notice it's C-O-U-N-S-E-L. So anytime the 2 attorneys are talking to each other, you're simply going to give them their names. Okay, now it's going to come up as SNU and IFPELT, but once you change their names in the edit mode, it's going to look like that. Okay. Now let's say the witness jumps in. Okay, so the witness comes in and it's not answering any questions. He's just talking. So we're going to identify him as the witness, colon, 2 spaces. I really need to use the restroom. Okay, so then you would identify him as the witness. The only time you're going to have the witness as an answer is if he is answering the questioning attorney. So just think of it as it's only going to be an A if he's answering an attorney that is the questioning attorney. It's like a privilege, okay? Same with the byline. An attorney only gets a byline if they have the privilege to question, okay? So let's say the court comes in. The court, 2 spaces. We will take a break soon. Continue, counsel. Okay, so now you just told him to continue. Now we're going to start with a by. Oh, let's go down one more. By, and that's on the far left. Notice it's the far left margin. Mr. Hill. And I need to pull down my, let's see. By Mr. Hill. Go to the next line. Question. You tab over once. Q, tab again. Where were you born? And then you would go from there with the answer once he answers, and then it would just be QA, QA unless he gets interrupted. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, you let me know. And I know it's a lot at first, but you will get used to it. Okay. The most important part of the for voice is actually signing in the correct speakers. Okay, that's your most important thing that you've got to remember to do. So I'm going to save this, and you can print this out if you want. Okay. So I saved it. You can print it now. All right, so now we're back. So that's the most important thing. If it's the court that's speaking, you gotta identify him as the court. If it's IFPELT or SNU, you gotta identify him. That's why it's so important you don't look down, because you could miss a sign change, especially when you get into high speeds. It's going to be, this light board's going to be lighting up pretty quickly, and you gotta be ready to do those sign changes. That's another thing you can do. Just start practicing with those sign changes: court, plaintiff, defense, uh, answer, question. Just go, even have somebody call them out to you if that helps you. Okay. And we're going to continue with transcripts. So from now on until you get into speed, you're going to see transcripts with every single lesson. Okay. So you're going to be able to see, and it's important to print out each one so you can see what the format looks like. And if you have questions like, why is this a byline, or why is this not a byline, or whatever question you may have, you can ask me and I'll explain why it is so that it makes sense. Okay. All right. Now what I want to do is I'm going to read this to you, and I want you to write it. If you get tired, or if you fall behind a little bit, it's okay. This is just for practice. But for the homework, I want you to actually write this at your own pace, putting in your internal punctuation because you have time and you're looking at it, and then submit that with lesson 31. Okay, I want to make sure your sign changes are correct. Now, you don't have to worry about changing the plaintiff and the defense, their names to their actual names. All I want to see is a byline, like by Mr. SNU question. So you would just do SNU question for a byline. Okay. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and do a practice run here, just for practice. And here we go. And you're going to see why it's so important to phrase as much as possible. Phrasing is going to be your best friend, and briefs that you've learned. Here we go. Ready? So sign in the court. I'm not going to call out sign changes. I want you to look at the board. Will you tell us your name and spell it for the record please? Hazel P. Kerr. Kerr. Are you married, ma'am? Yes, sir. How old are you? I am 21. Don't be nervous. I am not nervous. Mrs. Kerr, you are wife of the defendant, Mark Kerr. Yes, sir. All right. Where did you live on October 24, 2017? I lived at 3386 Forest Avenue. Now, did you see Mr. Kerr leave the house on that day? Yes, sir, I did. About what time? About 2:30. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Kerr. I have no further questions at this time. Mr. Cook, do you have any questions? Yes, Your Honor, I do. Mrs. Kerr, did your husband take anything with him when he left? Yes, sir. Okay. What did he take with him? He had a bag with a suit in it. He was going to the tailor shop. What color was the suit? If you remember. The suit was black. Did you see anything else in the bag? Nothing else. May we take a break? Yes. We can take a quick break. All right. Now, if you struggled with that, don't get frustrated. There's a lot to think about as far as the sign changes go. So the great news is you can go back and practice it as much as you want, and you should until you feel comfortable with that. Okay, so that's going to be part of your homework. Just going, looking at that and writing it out in steno. This is actually what it would look like if you were to actually take your notes and make a transcript. This is what the finished product would look like. All right, so I want you to submit your steno notes so I can see how you did. And you'll submit that with lesson 31. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. But that is now you know how to perform for voice. So congratulations, and we'll be practicing this until all the way through the rest of Theory 2. So you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.